Top 3 ETFs for 2024. First on our list is the ProShares UltraPro QQQ ETF, a portfolio known for its high growth rate and substantial volatility. This powerhouse portfolio began with a humble $10,000 and skyrocketed to an awe-inspiring $894,743. That's a compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, of a whopping 44.32%. However, with great reward comes great risk. The ProShares UltraPro QQQ ETF is no stranger to volatility, as indicated by its high standard deviation of 54.28%. Its best year saw an almost hard-to-believe growth of 198.27%. But remember, it's not always smooth sailing. The ETF's worst year suffered a significant decline of 79.8%, reflecting in its maximum drawdown of the same magnitude. Now, let's talk risk-adjusted returns. The Sharpe ratio for this ETF stands at 0.94, suggesting a reasonable return considering the risk involved. However, the Sortino ratio of 1.58 tells an even more exciting story. This ratio, which focuses on downside risk, suggests superior risk-adjusted performance. And as the great Theo Von said, doesn't that make you want to kid a fat kid at Kmart? Following in the vein of low prices, the expense ratio is a net of 0.88%, which is relatively low compared to other funds that are similar. But as we shift gears and move towards the end, let's not forget that, while the ProShares UltraPro QQQ offers high growth, it comes with a high degree of risk, with side effects that might include nausea, sweating, vomiting, and chest pain. So consult a doctor and a financial advisor to see if TQQ is right for you. Next, we have the Vanguard Information Technology ETF, offering substantial growth with comparatively less volatility. This portfolio started with a modest $10,000. Over time, it ballooned to a staggering $972,520. This growth represents a compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 20.41%. Now let's talk about volatility. The standard deviation of this fund is at 18.2%, which is significantly lower than our previous portfolio, the ProShares UltraPro QQQ. This suggests a smoother ride for investors, with less dramatic peaks and valleys. The best year for the Vanguard Information Technology ETF saw a growth of 52.65%. However, the worst year did experience a decline of 29.7%. That's almost half as expensive as a divorce. Its maximum drawdown sits at 32.52%, showing a significant reduction in downside risk compared to the ProShares UltraPro QQQ. Now onto the risk-adjusted returns. The Sharpe ratio of 1.06 indicates a slightly better risk-adjusted return compared to the ProShares UltraPro QQQ. Even more impressive is the Sortino ratio of 1.81, suggesting superior risk-adjusted performance, particularly when it comes to managing downside risk. The expense ratio is 0.10%, making it half as expensive as QQQ and returns better. The Vanguard Information Technology ETF offers a balance between growth and risk, making it a viable option for investors seeking stable returns, so this one is not for the streets. Lastly, we have the Fidelity 500 Index, known for its stable growth trajectory and lower volatility. Imagine starting with a sum of $10,000. In the case of the Fidelity 500 Index, this initial investment grew to $52,820. This growth signifies a compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 14.55%. This portfolio's standard deviation stands at 14.32%. This figure is substantially lower than the standard deviations of the previously discussed portfolios, ProShares UltraPro QQQ and Vanguard Information Technology ETF. This lower standard deviation indicates a lower volatility, suggesting a more stable growth trajectory. Now let's talk about the highs and the lows. The best year for the Fidelity 500 Index saw a growth of 32.37%. On the flip side, the worst year saw a decline of 18.13%. Its maximum drawdown, which is the greatest peak-to-trough decline, was minus 23.88%. This is significantly smaller compared to the drawdowns of the other two portfolios, reflecting a more stable performance with less downside risk. Let's move on to the risk-adjusted returns. The Sharpe ratio of the Fidelity 500 index is 0.94. This figure is on par with that of the ProShares UltraPro QQQ, indicating comparable risk-adjusted returns similar to the late-night munchies and getting a spicy burrito at Taco Bell. However, the Sortino ratio of the Fidelity 500 index is 1.50, suggesting a relatively better risk-adjusted performance, especially when considering downside risk. So what does all this mean for you? The Fidelity 500 index offers stable performance with less downside risk, making it an attractive option for investors seeking stability and consistent returns. Plus, the expense ratio is only 0.015%, making it one of the cheapest S&P 500 index is on the market. Of course, it's always important to consider your own risk tolerance and investment goals when choosing a portfolio. But for those who value stability, the Fidelity 500 index is certainly worth considering.